Combining the best of daily fantasy and survivor pools, Stat Hero is the next chapter in fantasy sports. No more competing with the sharks or experts ever, because your only competition is Stat Hero itself. The face of DFS has changed. Finally, a game designed for the rest of us.
Hey, what's going on? Jeff Ratcliffe here. Week 9 fantasy football is upon us. It's time to dive into those matchups, take an advanced look, of course, a granular level look, like we do at PFF, at the wide receiver cornerback matchups here for Week 9 fantasy football. We'll give you 2 upgrades, 2 downgrades. Of course, if you want the rest of that information, you can get it over at PFF.com with our wide receiver cornerback matchup chart. But diving into the chart this week, here's what I'm seeing for you here. In terms of some upgrades, I mean, first and foremost, the 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time game in London. Well, it features DJ Chark, who surprisingly is the number 5 fantasy wide receiver heading into Week 9. Nobody would have called that one. I do think we see a little bit of regression from him going forward, but not this week. You know, it's rare that a team makes a trade and actually gets worse because of that trade. You know, the idea is to get better, but the Texans secondary arguably got worse with the addition of Gary Conley. So far this season, in 7 games played, he's surrendered 4 receiving touchdowns, 14.9 yards per catch in his coverage. Upgrade DJ Chark this week. Love him in that matchup against that secondary there for the Houston Texans. Of course, we're also upgrading Allen Robinson, and hey, I love what we're seeing out of Allen Robinson, and it is noteworthy just given the overall state of the Chicago Bears offense. They really haven't been able to do a whole lot of anything this season, but it hasn't hurt Allen Robinson. He's consistently putting up fantasy numbers that are viable. I mean, he's not an elite player. He's not up there, certainly with DJ Chark's numbers even, but he's an every week starter and a guy who has shown some major upside this season. And of course, a lot of receivers have shown upside against that Philadelphia defense. So far this year, the Eagles giving up 13 catches per game, 186 yards, 1.5 receiving touchdowns to the position. So even with Mitchell Trubisky struggling, Allen Robinson is a strong play this week. We're upgrading him to a front-end wide receiver 2. Of course, he has wide receiver 1 upside in this matchup. All right, for the good, though, there always is the bad. So let's take a look at 2 bad matchups, and we're going to start with Odell Beckham Jr. Another game, another bad matchup. Last week it was against the New England Patriots. We correctly identified that he was going to struggle, and it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that one out. But this one, you look a little bit closer, he could struggle as well in this matchup. He's very likely going to see a shadow coverage from Chris Harris Jr., and if you've been around football for a while, you likely know his name. He's been one of the better corners in the league over the last half decade, and he's having a very strong season this year. The Broncos asking him to do a little bit more, especially in shadow coverage. Historically, he's a guy who, you know, was often in the slot. He's playing a lot on the outside now, and he really puts a damper on Odell Beckham Jr.'s overall fantasy upside this week. Harris is allowing just 2.3 catches per game in his coverage. That is tough for Odell Beckham Jr. I'm sorry, but at best, he's a mid-range wide receiver 2 play. I know that's not what you signed up for this year, but that's really where we are, especially in this matchup for Odell Beckham Jr. Finally, a guy who maybe you might be considering starting, probably not this week, but going forward. I did want to point this one out, though, just because to give you context here. So the guy is Mohamed Sanu, and we're not going to start him this week against Baltimore. You know, another player who was recently traded here, Marcus Peters. Well, Peters has been doing a pretty good job this season, and in fact, entering this week grades out as our number 4 corner at PFF. And, you know, a lot of it is what he's doing in terms of quieting receivers. You know, in 241 routes covered, he's only seen 16 targets. Now, Julian Edelman is going to man the slot. That's where Mo Sanu historically played for the Falcons. So that means Sanu's going to be on the outside. He's going to see his share of Peters in this one. Does put a damper on him. And again, as I said earlier, maybe you weren't considering starting him this week, but don't let this matchup be the decider in the future, because there are going to be some matchups going forward for the Patriots where I think we can use Mo Sanu. This obviously isn't one of them, but don't look back and say, well, he didn't do anything in Week 9. There is a reason for that. If you like all this information, like I said earlier in the video, you can check out our wide receiver cornerback matchup chart at PFF. Of course, my Friday Focus column, I break down even more upgrades and downgrades and talk about other positions as well. So that's PFF.com. In addition to that, rankings, projections, all kinds of football goodness. Again, the website is PFF.com.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.